Welcome to Business Over Brew. Nick Dar here with you again. Pleased to be joined in another episode. Lenhardt with Max Downtown. Max Incorporated, I guess is probably the name we should go with now, right?
Yep.
You guys got a lot of things going on, obviously. But let's start with just kind of the history of Max and how and when it got started.
Yeah, so it's actually been around for 40 years now, but it's almost like a new company at this point. The last couple of years, trying to expand, and the first 40 years, it was kind of set to just the downtown location. So even though it's been around for 4 decades, it's kind of like a new company all together the last couple of years.
As much as you know, obviously, I guess you probably weren't even born yet. But talk about what you know about when your dad started it.
My father started in the machine shop industry, where my great grandfather came over from Germany and started up a machine shop here in Alton. I guess Alton is where he landed when he came across the ocean on the boat back in the 40s. So my grandfather continued on that, and my father worked for his father. But in his early mid-20s, he kind of decided to break off and start his own company. So that's where the original building downtown Alton, that was to be known as Max, or maybe Timeout Lounge back then, started. And he continued and still does work in the machine shop industry, but this was kind of always a thing he wanted to do by himself.
That's one thing I'd heard about him that's just kind of different for most business owners. He still works a regular job every day, right?
He still gets up at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, goes to work out in Granite City right now.
So that's obviously a strong work ethic. It seems like it transferred down too.
I was working 40 hours a week from the time I was probably 12. I was probably working 30 to 40 hours a week, and I started working when I was 8 years old, actually.
Okay. So obviously you got to work early and kept going. So talk about just kind of the evolution of, jobs you've done there and how it kind of got to where it is today.
Well, back in he did have a small kitchen, I think, in the early 90s, late 80s, but it was a bar tavern.
Right. Yeah.
World changed. Nowadays you have to have food you don't have to, but you don't see very many, just taverns around. There's a couple here and there, but most places are going to have food in a full page menu. But back then in the 80s, it wasn't out of the ordinary just to have a bar and tavern and just sell beer and liquor. So that's kind of what he did in the early to mid 80s. And I think he might have put a kitchen in the back somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, but
probably a small one at the time, like just limited stuff,
and hamburger and French fries.
Right. Yeah.
Something where you could get something in your belly and keep drinking.
Right. Exactly. Right.
But it was one building, and then one building turned into two, and two turned into three down there. They were, fixer uppers, there wasn't much to them. So we knocked holes in the walls and added another bar here and some bathrooms over here. And I think the beer garden actually was a building at one point that it might have fell down in the middle of the night. So they just kind of scooped up the bricks and called it a beer garden.
It's a beer garden. Now it's open air.
Poured some concrete, and now it's a beer garden. It has been for 25 years now. But I think things started changing in the late 90s. The industry kind of changes every 10 to 20 years anyway. That's where the nightclub kind of came into effect. A lot of people around Alton kind of remember those days 25 years ago where it was Timeout or Club TO or
I was there for numerous dollar bottle Thursday nights. I feel like
Thursdays there's a large Missouri clientele that was coming over back then, and I think that might have lasted probably around 8 years or so.
Right.
And then the industry kind of changed, and now you don't really even see nightclubs anywhere anymore, so
dollar bottles have just definitely gone away for the most part.
That kind of ran its course. And I think back around 2007, 2008, probably right before or during the recession, Mac talked to Fast Eddie, and he decided, and Fast Eddie kind of told him, if you want to continue doing this, you have to have food and you have to have a kitchen.
Right.
So that was the construction of a kitchen, which I think that took you add a couple fryers, and then you outgrow that, and then you have to add a little bit more, and then you have to buy more refrigeration. And I think we finally finished the kitchen about 15 years later. It seemed like it just kind of added on and added on,
right.
added more seats and more bar stools, and and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, I think I started bar back when I was 8, stocking beer, ice, so on and so forth. And that kind of led into DJing whenever I was 13, 14. And then next thing I know, I think I was the first cook. I was working 12-hour shifts whenever I was 16, doing cooks, and I would be sweeping the bar floors at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, taking the trash out till 4 o'clock in the morning.
And you couldn't really complain to your dad because he's like, well, I got to be at work at 5:30 tomorrow morning.
It was a lifestyle.
Right.
I think by the time I was going to bed, he was getting ready to go to work, at his other job. So,
right.
Back then there was only, 6 or 8 employees, so you kind of had to do everything yourself. You didn't have much help. You kind of had to grow into those shoes. So
the work ethic obviously is similar. What are maybe some other similarities and then some differences in how you guys operate?
No, we butt heads a lot. We did back, years ago, not maybe so much more, but if somebody that's been doing something for 30, 40 years now, they're set in their ways.
Sure.
It's just the revolution of social media, online ordering, DoorDash, those things are
probably all things you were saying. We got to do this. We got to do this.
Right. You have to be able to, put on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and the advertising that comes with it, and the DoorDash and Uber Eats and Grubhub. You don't necessarily have to do those things, but it comes to a point nowadays, and maybe not so much 10 years ago when it was newer, but
post-COVID, I think, especially.
I mean, there's really, I don't know if you open a business without creating those things anymore.
Right.
Which is part of it's built into the industry.
You mentioned he did a major expansion of the kitchen during a recession. How would you describe your levels of risk tolerance? Who's more of a risk taker between the two of you, would you say?
I would say me.
Yeah.
I would say me. And not so, I mean, now, but whenever I was younger, you just kind of go. You don't think about the,
right.
You're like, okay, well, I got 30, 40 more years. And, when you're in your 50s and 60s, you kind of, think about retirement.
Right. You're not thinking about taking on more work or doing more things.
Yeah,
you're thinking about doing less things, probably.
But when you're in your 20s and 30s, you don't think about it like that. So, there's a lot of that involved in it as long with finances and things like that. But I was just trying to develop some of these properties downtown. I think there's 10 or 11 of them down there. I'm still working on them. You're working on them every day, but barbecue restaurant's probably going to be later this year in downtown. We're going to start developing that probably in September.
Right.
As long as with the event center in the back parking lot. I think River and Routes is going to dump some money into downtown Alton here next year, and maybe try to get some of these other buildings fixed up and get some businesses moved in, and update downtown Alton a little bit. And the live entertainment, do you remember the block parties?
Oh, sure.
15, 20 years ago. I mean, it's been 15 years since they've had those.
Right.
Let's start getting some of that kind of live music feel, that entertainment feel back downtown that's kind of been lost.
I think, one of the things about any area or any town that's trying to grow and develop, which most of them are including ours, is the desire to like hit home runs. Like, we got to do these big things, and some of those things are good, but I think a lot of the things to path toward growth is just those little things, like you talked about, just some live entertainment, getting the buildings filled up, making it look and appear more vibrant.
It's a group effort. I mean, just small business owners, the municipalities and the cities. I mean, there's a lot of dominoes that go into, building something, and it takes a lot of people and it takes a lot of money to do that.
Right.
But, it does seem like, cities like Granite City and Wood River and Alton, the state of Illinois is starting to kind of push money into like maybe Main Street America again.
Right.
I've dealt with, probably half a dozen companies this year that I've dealt with for 5 or 6 years that have sold out to bigger companies. And you see the baby boomers are all getting to the ages where, if they had businesses, they're either selling the businesses or closing up shop. And there's really not as many people to fill those seats and buy those businesses.
Sure.
So those companies that these baby boomers have had for 20, 25, 30 years, they're bigger companies are kind of gobbling them up.
Yeah.
And there's not that need anymore for the small businesses. And I think that could be, you know, a big problem in the future. But for now, you know, there's a lot of downtown areas, and that's kind of why I went to Wood River, because they had a niche and a need to, you know, get some of these 100-year-old, 75-year-old buildings fixed up and have businesses put back in them.
Right.
And that's kind of the idea of what I'm trying to do here in the years to come, is to fill that need and go to these city councils, you know, see what they need. If it's a restaurant, if it's a convenience store, you know, sometimes you just kind of got to build whatever's on the market and the building can offer.
Right.
So, you know, Main Street America hopefully is going to start making a comeback here in the next 10 years. And I hope to be a part of it.
Right. Well, I think you have been, for sure. As we sit here, let's see, July 9th, 2024, how many businesses are officially open at the moment? And then kind of what's the plan going forward?
I have Max on Ferguson, Max Pizza and Poker, Max on 4th, and Max Downtown. And I'm hoping to have Alton Barbecue Company probably early next year. And
that'll be a physical location?
It'll be a physical location. Okay. And I'm currently looking for a brick and mortar for Mini Crow.
Okay.
I'm thinking like Max Mini Crown Malts somewhere.
Right.
So,
and one thing we kind of skipped over a little bit, I think that was a big part of Max too, was just you open the kitchen, and I don't remember exactly when the off-track betting came into play, but that's been
2003 or 2004.
And that's been obviously a big thing for you guys as well, with big Kentucky Derby celebration, and just talk about how, you know, that's played into the business as well.
So I think the way that happened was Fairmont went to put an off-track betting parlor somewhere in Alton, and somebody ended up referring them to us.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of just came down, put a deal together and signed it. And all of a sudden, a year later, there was off-track betting parlor down there.
Right.
And that's another industry that's kind of, you know, live horses, you know, it's still popular, but, you know, not like it was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
There's just so much else. Yeah.
There's so much more to do now.
Especially in the gaming area.
And that's why it's one big reason why sports betting,
mm-hmm.
You know, Fairmont is allowed to have a sports book.
Right. Yeah.
And they're also able to put sports books, retail sports books, inside their OTB locations, which us fitting the bill.
Okay.
So they have a off-track betting parlor in Sauget, Springfield, and Alton, Max being Alton. So they actually do have the capability and licensing to put sports books in Max in downtown Alton.
It's funny. It seems like, man, maybe I'm getting old. The years fly by, I guess, but it feels like just yesterday is like the only place you could place a sports bet was that you had to go to Vegas to mm-hmm. gamble on sports. And now it's, you know, on almost everywhere.
Yeah. And Missouri,
especially if you have a phone or a computer.
It's on Missouri's litigation too. So
right,
I think they might vote on it later this year.
Yeah.
But I think they've kind of been hesitant towards putting sports books in their OTB locations, just because the owner is getting older,
mm-hmm.
and I think he's been trying to sell it for a year or two.
Right.
So, you know, I don't know if he just doesn't want to dump millions of dollars building these sports books, you know, if he's going to go around and sell it to another company. But there has been interest in some other gaming companies purchasing the horse track. So if that does come to tuition, which eventually it will sell to somebody,
sure,
it'll be up to the new owners to, you know, if they want to pursue retail sports books in the off-track betting locations.
Our previous owner, and still involved with the radio station, Sam Stem, he talked about when he hired me to be general manager, like he kind of felt like it was time to go when he was seeing opportunities that 10 years ago he would have said, I'm going to jump on that. And that's great. And then he was, at that point, he was just like, I didn't have the energy, or I guess as you get closer to the end, it's not as exciting to you. It's like, well, I could do that, but that's a lot of work. And then if it doesn't work, where am I going to be at? So I think what you touched on earlier is it's interesting where we're going from a small business perspective, like who is going to be the next generation of ownership for small businesses. And it's great that you're getting involved and not only getting involved, but really intent on growing it, it seems like.
Yeah. One thing COVID taught me was diversify.
Right.
You know, don't have all your eggs in one basket. You know, if something happens like COVID, you know, and your whole business model shut down, or, you know, something, you know, blizzard happened. That's one thing when I was a kid. I remember, you know, if there was a bad ice storm or something, your sales pretty much tank for an entire week.
Sure,
It's
right,
hard
yeah.
to come back from
Right.
that.
And
Sales,
COVID was like the ultimate ice storm, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. So, if you can have, your eggs spread out a little bit more, some of those, unforeseen things don't hurt as bad.
Right. I was thinking about when you were I knew you were coming on the show. It's like he must have a real recipe that he's got confidence in to open all these new ventures. Is there a recipe that you follow every time, or?
I learn something new every time I open one. You think you got it figured out, or you got it somewhat figured out.
Right.
But, the problem with, your perception of opening a business is first it takes, 6, 9, 12 months to build it out and, construct and set the accounts up and so on and so forth with the cities and inspections.
Right.
But just because you open it up doesn't mean you're going to start making money.
No.
I mean, it's usually the opposite.
The worst thing that ever happened to
much-
businesses was somebody saying, I guess it was Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. That's absolutely not true.
No. You try to, and you can't just scale back because you also have to please everybody that comes in for the first time.
Right.
Your first impression means a lot.
Sure. Especially in the restaurant or food industry, I would.
Overstaffing, the first 6 to 9 months, making sure people waited on hand and foot. But you're kind of just holding on tight, there for the first year because you got to please everybody. The perception has to be that it's good and you want people to come back. But at the same time, you're kind of learning as you go.
Mm-hmm.
The certain holidays will be busy at one location, and there won't be anybody there at the other location. It just depends on the public and the community.
And you just left sitting there kind of scratching your head, like, what, why are people here? And sometimes it even happens where you maybe spent more effort trying to get people to one, and it's not always a perfect science, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the advertising that comes with it, as you are well aware, where to push and what to push.
Right, exactly.
So it's you think you have an idea, but at the same time you're blindfolded. You just learn as you go.
Right. What's your day-to-day look like? You're an early riser, late riser?
Well,
you've got little ones too, so you're probably.
I do. I actually stay awake probably longer than I should, just because I have diabetes, and I try to stay up for 3 or 4 hours after I eat, just to level off my blood sugar. So sometimes that kind of pushes my mornings off. So I'm getting up at 6:30. I'm getting up at 8 o'clock. But
in the businesses you're in, I guess. Though it seems like the bar restaurant business, it's almost 24 hours a day.
It is. It's 7 days a week. I mean, on holidays you're working when everybody else is off, and usually there's enough stuff that's broke after a weekend where Monday and Tuesday you got to fix everything and put it all back together after a weekend. So yeah, if you don't like working 7 days a week, 60 to 80 hours a week, and working every holiday,
right,
don't get into the restaurant business. And I'm sure anybody that owns a bar or restaurant will tell you that exact same thing.
Right. I mean, I would say probably to the extreme in that business, but almost any small business, that is when you decide to do it, you just know that it's going to take over your life in a lot of ways.
You're married to it.
Right. Absolutely.
It's like having another kid or another. I don't say that. But
well, yeah,
go with kids.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, more of a hassle or less of a hassle. Sometimes either one, I guess.
But it does have its benefits, as you
absolutely, yeah. And you do feel like, especially in a community our size, like you are making an impact. And that's one thing that I certainly like about it. Talk about assembling and leading a team, because I know you've got a good team, but that's been certainly a challenge that you hear about, especially in your industry.
It is. I would say we probably have 65 employees roughly. I would say probably half or more of those are full-time employees.
Wow.
So
and when you think about, just a quick aside, like that's the kind of impact that a small business, which yours isn't even small anymore, really. But I mean, 65 local people that you're putting to work, and half of those on a full-time basis.
Yeah. And we have people that's been there for 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
We have people that's been there for 7, 8 years, 6 years. I mean, we don't have, as much as you would think that we do, we don't have a high turnover rate. I mean, I would say 75% of the people that work there have probably been there for a minimum of 2 to 3 years.
Right.
Now we do have, 10 or 15 people that summertime jobs or people that are in college and high school, and that's kind of a revolving door. But
Sure.
for the fixtures, of people that's been there, it's they take care of us, we take care of them. They make good money. There's for that industry, there's people out down there that do well, and they don't have any reason to leave. There's things that I've looked into with providing insurance and things like that. But it's one of those things where, like I said, some of those people are going to college and high school, and the quick dollar seems more
right.
As you
Sure.
I was that age and you were that age too one time. So
before you have kids, you're like, health insurance, what on earth would I possibly need that for?
Just rub it off and put a Band-Aid
exactly
on it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, we're fortunate enough to have a fantastic crew of people that care and that show up to work, and and now with the state of Illinois passing the week paid vacation time and all that stuff.
Right.
So they get to be able to take advantage of that program through the state of Illinois, and the state of Illinois has retirement programs that you can sign up for. So a lot of those things that maybe weren't offered to employees that work for bars and restaurants and convenience stores and stuff, and now it's through the state of Illinois, so they can take advantage of all those programs now.
And so I know you've got some new things on the horizon immediately, but where do you see in the next 5 years? Where would you like it to go?
Well, I kind of want to get into the franchise end of that business. It's kind of hard to do whenever you only have 4 places.
Yeah.
So I guess my goal would be probably within 3 years to have maybe 10, 12 locations and kind of run those and operate those through me and get them built and get them operating for 12, 24 months, get them going in the right direction, and then start franchising out.
Do you anticipate that would be more like on the pizza side of things or on the
so it's franchisees come from all different walks of lives.
Could be the convenience.
Yeah. You're going to have people that having a couple convenience stores are good, or some people don't want to work, like I said, 60 hours a week, 7 days a week on the restaurant side. Some people do.
Right.
So one good thing about like the gaming licenses, looking forward a few years, is those gaming machines can kind of supplemental the franchisees bills.
Sure.
And people could operate a business almost debt free, and pay a small fee to get the franchisee license. But when it comes to the rent or the leases or all that mumbo jumbo that goes along with it, those could be relatively next to nothing.
Right.
So that guy that retires, that his dream has been to open a bar for 25 or 30 years, and he might not want to go buy a commercial building and spend half of his retirement, and drop $500,000 into a bar. Right. He can kind of just walk into an operating location at, a fraction of what it would actually cost him to do it by himself. And if he wanted to do it for 36 months or 6 years, however long he wants to do it, he can kind of sign up for that.
Right.
And then, after a couple of years, if he says, hey, this wasn't what I thought it was, which a lot of times it is, then no harm, no foul. He can kind of walk away from it unhurt.
And have, the recipe for what's made you successful, and kind of get, the lessons without having to take the scars.
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's a younger person that is hungry and wants to work those hours, and they sign on and they love it and they make great money after a few years, and they want to do a second one, or if they want to continue on, and double down on the first one, and then more power to them, let them do it.
Well, I think you hear a lot about franchising, and one of the things I've heard, and I believe, is that whether or not you franchise is not necessarily the entire point. It just makes you run your business better.
Yeah.
If you're thinking that way, if you're thinking, hey, how could I develop this formula and this recipe that I could pass on to somebody else and not have to run the day-to-day operations? It'll make even if you didn't expand past that, it would make your current operation better.
Yeah. And there's only so much you can do. Running one is hard enough.
Right.
Running 6 of them is unheard of. It's impossible. Nobody can do it.
Right.
Unless you have a hell of a team behind you. But there's come to a point where sooner or later, you kind of got to start breaking off and letting other people run businesses like it's their own business.
Right.
And, the thing with that is, that money that comes in just goes back towards advertising and things like that can grow a brand quicker.
Right.
The hardest part about building these things is the first half a dozen. Because you don't the first 4 or 5 you don't have the revenue coming in, you're spending more money than what you're making, and it's trying times. But once you kind of flip that role and get 6 or 7 or 8 of them, then you have more money coming in, you have more advertising going out, and it kind of just a snowball effect.
And just a more refined playbook of, hey, here's what works, here's what hasn't worked, things like that.
Yeah, and you get better at it as you go. You learn more and more every time you open a new one.
Well, I think that's a great goal, and wish you the best of luck at it. And anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to mention before we wrap it up here?
No, I think we covered everything. I appreciate your time, Nick.
Thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it. And best of luck to you in the future. We'll have to have you on again and kind of check in with you down the road.
Sounds good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.